bad memories and kind of some ugly memories too, don't we? And some in the middle. But memories are powerful, and they're there for a reason. And God gave you a brain, and God gave you memories so that you can remember stuff that happened. I'll never forget, I was 15 years old. Anytime a guy says, I remember when I was 15, you know the story is going to be crazy, right? You get that? 15-year-old guys, I'm seriously, that's why I'm going to pay my daughter like $1,000 and say, don't date until you graduate college. You promise? Here's $1,000. Okay. I know one guy who did that, a pastor, and it worked. It was great. His daughter steered clear of a lot of problems. Anyway, I was 15. My best friend was 15. Our other friend that always hung out with us, a little trifecta of guys, 15 years old, and he lived on a lake, and they had a boat. And we went skiing all the time, and it was really, really fun. Well, what happens in the summer when you got 15-year-olds hanging around doing stuff like that is eventually they get bored. And that spells big trouble. So his sister, older sister, was out there with us, and we all decided, you know what, let's take the canoe and let's get behind the boat and we'll tie the ski rope to the canoe and we'll drag the canoe through the lake and we'll all be in the canoe and it'll be so much fun. And we were like, dude, that is the best idea I've ever heard. So we do. We tie the ski rope through the canoe. All of us are in the canoe except my best friend Tommy who owned the boat, and he's up there just going along, and we're having fun and being towed around in this little canoe, fiberglass canoe, by the way. And we're having fun, and then we're kind of like, nah, you know, we need to probably go a little faster. I think, yeah, speed it up, man. Let's go. Let's get this thing on the road. Let's go. So he starts going a little bit faster and a little bit faster, and then he's got that thing full throttle. And before you knew it, what happens to that fiberglass under all that pressure? Just sheer physics of it were horrible. It just disintegrated. It just literally began to break. We're falling in the water. Turn it off! I mean, it was just nuts. Oh my gosh, that memory is seared into my brain. I will never forget that day. But here's the worst part. We come dragging the canoe up. It's mangled in pieces, you know, a couple $100 canoe. We get it up on the shore, and then we see the walk of the dad coming down from the house to the lake. I'll never forget that. What a sight. All of us. And then I look over at my best friend Tommy. That's his dad. And he looked the worst out of all of us. He looked like Casper. It was wild. Oh my gosh, that was so funny. Another time, I was running through some woods in Sanford, Florida. I was chasing my buddies. We were playing guns, toy guns out in the woods. And I was barefoot. And I was about 8 or 9 years old. And what did my mom tell me before I left the house? Get your shoes on, son. I mean, I'm 9. I know what's up. I'm 9 years old. I know how life works. I don't need my shoes. So I'm chasing my friends through the woods. And they go around this puddle of water. And I decide to go through the puddle of water. And there was an old rusty slide that had been broken down in the water, and I just sliced up my feet. I remember I was standing in the shower. My mom's trying to get water on it to get out all the dirt and the muck and the mire, and I didn't want to get into it. It was so horrible. Both feet cut up. Had to go to the emergency room, get it all sewn up. I will never forget that memory, ever. Now, if you ask me what I had for breakfast 3 days ago, I've forgotten that one. And then there's a really hard memory, and some of you can probably relate. And we've talked about this a couple of times. I remember when my stepfather came to us and he said, I'm leaving. I remember that day. The tears. I did not want him to go. I did not want him to leave. That memory of watching him turn and walk away was so powerful to me. It really, really touched my heart. Broke my heart, honestly. So what is it about those memories? What is it about the hard stuff, especially we remember? Isn't that true? The really hard stuff? The main thing I want to say today is this, that the cross of Jesus Christ is not just about your atonement. It's not just about your salvation. more than that. The cross of Christ. God uses moments in your life that are hard and they are difficult to change you, to minister to you, to bless you, to help you, to open your eyes to who He really is. For whatever reason, once Adam and Eve fell in the garden, God has let sin and death run its course. But He uses the pain of this life, He uses the hard stuff of life to teach us. I read a great quote this week from Tim Keller. He says, "Painfully, suffering is almost a prerequisite if we are going to be much use to other people. It makes us far more compassionate when we walk through suffering." Is that true? How true is that? Because when you walk through suffering, what happens? You get broken. The proud, when they walk through suffering, begin to be humbled by the pain, by the difficulties, by the trials of life. I love that quote. It comes from a man who's in his 60s, who has suffered himself, and he has been a pastor and has seen many people suffer year after year after year. And you know what that's turned him into? A compassionate pastor. Amen? That's the downside of a young pastor, by the way, because they haven't suffered enough. Well, I'm glad I'm not young. Here's our problem, though. What happens with the hard stuff of life? What do we tend to do with it? We tend to run from it. We tend to try to forget it. We try to eradicate it from our minds. Sweep it under the rug. Anybody with me? We try to medicate it. We run from the hard stuff of life. The highway of hardship. When God gets you on that highway, what's the first thing you want to do? Find the nearest exit. Anybody? We want to, when you experience pain, what do you want to do? You want to find what? Relief. When? As soon as possible. Stat, as they say at the hospital. That's when you want to find relief, isn't it? But what if God has decreed that it is in the valley of the shadow of death that He does His best work in your heart? I think that's true. Listen to Romans 8:28, and we know this verse by memory. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good. He doesn't say all things are good, but all things work together for our good, to those who are called according to His promise. Okay? According to His purpose. So you're going through a tremendous hardship, arduous trial in life. And there's part of you that wants it to be over as soon as possible. But if God is working in you in that situation for your good, maybe we shouldn't be looking for a way out so soon. Maybe we should sit in it for a while so that God can do a greater work of good. In fact, the good that Paul's talking about is found in the next verse. For those whom He foreknew, He also did what? Predestined to be conformed to the image of the Son. And guess what? If God is going to change you, what is He going to have to use? He's going to have to use pressure, heat, hardship, time, so much more to shave off the old you and to make you look more and more and more like the Son, Jesus Christ. Now, I've run for most of my life away from my childhood, from my story. And it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that a wise Christian counselor came along. And one of the first things he asked me is, he said, "Jeremy, tell me your story." So I told him my story. That was a hard thing for me to do. Because what I've been doing most of my life is running from my story. And here he wants me to talk about the story. In fact, he asked me to celebrate my story because it's God's story for me. Therefore, it's good. Are the hard things that happened to me, the sins that were committed against me, the sins that I committed, were those good? No, but God used them for good, did he not? Is that what he does? That's what he's in the business of doing. You know, my parents didn't do a good job of parenting. They were largely absent. They were not good parents. And so there's a large part of me growing up that was longing for what? I was longing to be parented. I was longing to be loved. And as we walked through my story with the counselor, he was able to point me through the story to Christ. And there came a calm assurance, a joy in my heart I never had experienced before, when I saw that all along, God wanted to parent me. God wanted to love me. And that's what he's in the business of doing. One of the great things about the Bible is that we see over and over and over again how God ordained trials push people to the Lord. Amen?
Amen.
We see the really hard stuff in life breaking his servants down so that they can be used by the Father. I think that's what he does with us. Think about Moses for a moment. Raised in Egypt, but he saw the plight of his people, and he cared for them, and he was a leader, and he knew deep down in his heart that God wanted him to do what? Help lead his people. So what did he decide to do? Like a lot of guys, he decided to go down there and start setting some stuff straight. What does he end up doing? Killing an Egyptian. So what does God do? Sends him off to the wilderness, to the desert. And how long is he there? 40 days? 40 years. Imagine that. A man of God knowing that God has called him to lead God's people. And he's ready to go. But he has a lot of what? A lot of learning to do first. Preparation. God prepares men best in the desert. He was a shepherd for 40 years. Now let me ask you something. Think about it with me. What did he learn out there in the desert as a shepherd? Patience, trust, hope. Not doing things in his own strength, but he needs the strength of another who's far greater. You think Moses can take on Egypt by himself in his own human strength? Never. Here's another thing to think about. He's in the desert for 40 years. God's going to eventually call him to do what? Lead his people, God's people, from Egypt to where? Promised land. What's the route they're going to take to get to the Promised Land? The desert. So think about this. He was raised in Egypt. He knew very little of the desert in terms of geography and living out there. So the whole time he's a shepherd, he's learning about the desert. Does he know that's what's going to happen eventually? No, not yet. But God knew. God was training him, preparing him for the long, arduous journey from Egypt to the Promised Land. That's awesome. So deserts. What desert have you been in before? What desert are you in? What desert will you be in one day? God uses deserts to teach us. They're arid, they're dry, they're uncomfortable. Think about Jesus being led by the Spirit into the wilderness, into the desert. For how long? 40 days. No food, no water, no nothing. Imagine that. All alone. Hot, tired, miserable. The human side of him, certainly. You would be, I would be. Sweaty. And And on the 40th day, what happens? The enemy strikes. He comes to tempt Jesus. When he's most vulnerable, to derail him from the mission that God the Father had sent him on. He's sly, isn't he? Cunning. Evil. Deceptive. But Jesus survives the temptation. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
We could go on and on. Joseph, David, Elijah, Jeremiah. Today I want you to turn to Genesis 32. This is a very familiar passage. This is when Jacob wrestles with God. Genesis 32. Let's take a time. Let's start in 23. He took them and sent them across the stream and everything else that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket, and Jacob's hip put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered." The sun rose up upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the people of Israel do not eat the sinew of the thigh that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh. Now, before we dive into this, you have to remember that there are always two primary perspectives in life. There is your vantage point, your perspective, which is chronological. That's how we go through life, but very narrow. You only see life dimly. You only see a few things. And then there's God's perspective. God sees everything all at once. Beginning, the middle, and the end, all at once. That's where faith comes in. That's where trust comes in. God, I cannot quite understand what's going on here, but I know you do know what's going on. In fact, you are behind it all, working through masterfully to accomplish your good purposes in life. Take that to the bank, that He is working on your behalf, on my behalf. Think of it like this. You have an author who writes a book, and then you have characters within the story. How much do the characters know about the story? Only what the author allows them to know. That each character in the book only sees a particular perspective. But the author knows what? He knows the entire thing before one word is written. That's our God. You all understand that? It's a crude analogy because He's much greater than that. But that helps us, especially in those dark moments, where it is really, really tough, God. I hope you're here. I hope you're working. I hope you're doing something in the midst of my struggle. And you can be sure that He is. Amen?
Amen.
He is working. That's a confident hope that our God is a sovereign King who is all-powerful and all-loving and working. So think about the cross. Think about how horrible, evil, terrible that day was. We're going to celebrate Easter coming up, okay? Think about how bad that was. But you know why they call it Good Friday? Because even though it was really, really horrible, it was sinful, it was pure, unadulterated evil, God used that horrible thing called the cross to do what? Defeat our two greatest enemies, sin and death. So he takes something really hard, and what does he do through it? Makes something beautiful. That's our God. That's the theology of the cross. And if he can do that with Christ, he can do that with you and your pain, and your suffering, and your evil. He can use that to bless you, to open your eyes to who he is, to change you. But you guys remember the story of Jacob. I like Jacob. He's conniving. I mean, he was a second-born son. And in the ancient world, guess who got everything? Not the second-born, the firstborn. Esau, his brother. But you know who their grandfather was? Abraham. And Abraham died when these boys were 15. Do you think Abraham talked to them about the promises that God gave him? Yes. Jacob believed Abraham. Esau did not. And God tells Isaac that the younger will serve the older. But you know what Isaac did with that revelation? That's in Genesis 23. He ignored it. He doted and he loved and he singled out Esau as his favorite son. And you have to be careful as a parent in doing that, don't you? You have to make sure you don't pick one kid over another. Because what happens to the other kids that get neglected? They have a hole in their heart now. That's what happened to Jacob. He saw growing up that his dad loved firstborn Esau more than him. Do you think that hurt him? And he walked a life of pain because of that. You also know that during Isaac's later years, he grows to be blind, can barely see anything. He calls in the son. He knows his death is near. He calls in Esau, prepare a meal for me. I'm going to touch you. I'm going to bless you. Make you the head of the family. You get everything. It's just a formality, but they did that. And what does Jacob do? Before Esau even gets there, he puts on hair on his arms because Esau was hairy. And he goes into that room. He is blessed by his dad, who thought it was Esau, but it wasn't. And you know, I've always thought, why did Jacob do that? Because I think he wanted so desperately the blessing of his dad, the love of his dad, the care, the words that come from his father's mouth. Desperately wanted that so badly that he used false pretenses to get that accomplished. And then we know what happens, right? Esau finds out. Is Esau very happy about this? No, sir. Esau decides he's going to kill his brother. So what does Jacob do? He leaves. He does a smart thing. He takes off. And he ends up with Laban, and he ends up marrying Rachel and Leah, and Laban just knocks, it's just a bad story. And eventually, he starts heading back home. And then he hears Esau and 400 men are on their way to meet you. And Jacob fears for his life, does he not? He's standing there in the Jabbok River, and he sends the family and the servants, all that he owns, across the river. And he's standing there alone. And he's probably praying, and he's probably thinking, today may be the end of my life. Esau does not love me. Esau wants to kill me. And immediately, a man attacks him. And they begin to wrestle with one another. Now here's the thing about Jacob. He was a strong dude. They would have over wells these huge stones to cover a well. And then the people that would get water, they'd have to remove these stones. 3 shepherds could not move one stone. Jacob shows up, and guess what he does? Moves it by himself. That dude was strong, was he not?
Yeah.
So he's wrestling with this man. He doesn't know who he is, but they're in a wrestling match. And the day begins to break. And the one who's wrestling Jacob says, I have to go. Let go of me. I have to leave. And Jacob won't let go. So the man reaches down, and in the Hebrew language, this is really interesting, he barely touches his side. It just shatters and destroys his hip socket. And so this man who was a wrestler, you need your hips in wrestling, don't you? Very strong, wrestling people time and time again throughout his life, is now rendered broken. Now has a limp. But he's holding on still to this man. And he begins to realize this is not just a man. This is God in the form of a man. And he says, please, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. I've been looking for this my whole life. I think it was in that moment that the desire for the affection of his father, the blessing of his dad, the beauty he saw in Rachel could not be found in any person in this life, in this world. Only from God. And I think in that moment, I love that verse where it says, and there God blessed him. Now listen, in the Bible, when someone blesses another, it's usually verbal. We don't have what was written down. I think what happened was this. God in the form of a man is wrestling with Jacob. And he's getting ready to leave. And he blesses him. And I think what he spoke in Jacob's ear was, I love you. I'm your strength. I'm your hope. I'm your courage. I will be with you. Follow hard after me. Trust in me, Jacob. Everything you've been longing for in life can be found in me. Take peace. Take rest in your relationship with me. Something along those lines, I think, is what God said to him. And there overcame Jacob a change like no other. Because he now had a heart that was at rest. Peace with God. A beautiful, beautiful moment. His whole life wrestling, his brother, his dad, Laban, so many others. He'd been longing for a touch from God, and he finally got it as he wrestled. Now listen, God needed Jacob to wrestle during his life. He needed him to do that. Think about Joseph. We'll close here. Joseph was a spoiled, rotten rat. You get that? That's the truth. He was spoiled, rotten by his dad. Now, if God had come to him and said, Joseph, now listen, you're young and you're spoiled, rotten. What do you think Joseph's reply would have been? What does a spoiled, rotten kid do? Oh, you're right. I need to change my ways. No, they don't do that, do they? So God had to drag him through the muck and the mire and the tragedies and the trials of life, did he not? Joseph had a hard road to get humble, didn't he? But eventually he got to a place where he trusted not in himself, he trusted in the Lord. So we are Christians who need to be broken. One writer said it like this: we are Christians who dance with a limp. I like that. Isn't that good? We dance with a limp. Because it is God who wants to humble us. And he wants us to rely upon not ourselves, not our own strength, but on his. So think about your memories. Think about the hard stuff that you've gone through in life. And know that God is behind them, working through them for your good, Don't try to erase those memories, but embrace them. As hard as they are. Because it is God who is working through them in a really powerful way to show you who He is, to bless you, to help you understand this is not about you. This is not about human strength, but human weakness. And when you're broken by God, that's when He can really bless your life. That's when He can really use you. And so as we close, I pray that maybe this week you would think through your story. Think about those hard memories that you've been running from your whole life. Really hard stuff. And begin to thank God. Lord, thank you for my story. It's yours for me. And help me see you working in the midst of all of that to point me to you. To point me to Christ. And to help me rely upon Him. That's a theology of the cross. You can take that to the bank. Because God is working in ways that we cannot even think or imagine to change into the image of His Son. And He uses the hard stuff in life to do just that. Let's pray. So Father, as we end here today, I know that in a room like this, there are a lot of hard memories. There are a lot of difficult things that have happened to people in this life. But Lord, we can take hope that you are God and you are a sovereign Lord who is working through even the hard stuff, especially the hard stuff, to open our eyes to the reality of who you are and how you work and what you're asking us to do. Thank you for these stories of Moses, who started it off by relying upon his own strength, only to be humbled under your mighty hand, and then he relied upon you. Thank you for Jacob. Thank you that he was a man wrought with sin and problems and issues, and he wrestled everybody he came into contact with. But everything he longed for, he finally found in you. Everything we long for can never be found in another person, another thing, anything on this earth can only be found in you. So help us to stop looking to others and begin to cast our gaze at the cross. And remember that that is where life is found. Life abundantly can be found there. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. And if somebody in here does not know you, my prayer for them is that they would acknowledge they're a sinner in desperate need of a Savior. They can't do it on their own. They have to run to you, Lord. You are the one and only Savior of all of mankind. And if they put their faith and their hope and their trust in you for that salvation, they will be born again. They will be changed into a new creation in Christ. The old has passed away, behold, the new has come. So Lord, take this offering of praise and prayer and fellowship in your word and use it in our hearts. Take my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. Thank you for hard times. Thank you for trials. Thank you for suffering. Because in those moments is when you speak the loudest, the clearest, and you change us radically, more and more into the image of your Son. It's in your name we pray. Amen. Amen. Remember, if you have any questions